I was born in England, grew up in Sussex. So I went to one of these very sort of Harry Potter style countryside boarding school. But I wasn't a boarder عشان طبعا ما عندناش بنات يباتوا برا البيت. I was super geeky nerd at school, so I was definitely not one of the cool people. My family is not a conservative family. We were brought up as احنا مصريين. واحنا مسلمين. So I wasn't one of these kids who at like 14, 15, I'm like going to the club or I'm smoking cigarettes. By default, you become not cool. I went to school after a weekend once and I discovered إن في شلة بنات كده who I thought I was part of their شلة. They had all gone to the cinema مع بعض and they hadn't invited me. I'm like خلاص, my life is over. They get to go out and do this and do that. اشمعنى أنا? And I sat كده on the bottom of the staircase in the house and then my dad came and sat next to me and he goes, طب هم نظموا خروجة and they didn't invite you. Instead of waiting to be invited, why don't you organize something and you invite and you lead? That was a big thing for me. طبعا I only retrospectively you realize how important these kind of moments are. I finished school and I went and I studied Bachelor of Science in Business at the University of Bath. I didn't want to study business. I did my A-levels in French and drama, and so that's what I really had a passion for, was theater studies, and I loved it, and I loved the creativity, and I used to study dance till I was 18. I was like, that was my thing. But طبعا, yeah, you're gonna study drama. So when I studied business in Bath, probably one of the worst decisions. I wasn't savvy enough to understand how affected I am by my space and my surroundings. There was no creative arts in Bath. So as a university, it didn't really play into my sensibilities. Also as a town, it was a very quiet, sleepy town. I actually ended up being very depressed there. But it was a 2-year sandwich course, which means I had to do 2 compulsory 6-month internships. The first internship I did was with Disney. So I was working in TV marketing there. But طبعا as an intern it meant I was data inputting. That was the year Red Bull launched their student brand manager program and their wings programs with the girls with the cars. And they had a paper in the Times. It had all the different requirements and you had to write an essay. So anyway, I wrote the essay in kaza and I got that job and that was amazing. That was so pivotal for me because the experience, and it was such a great experience in creative marketing and كانوا بيسفرونا everywhere, like all around Europe, a very opening experience for me. For my second internship, استهبلت, and I said I was going to do an internship for Mosr, which meant I was just going to Abdalla for Mosr for 6 months. I came to Egypt. I'd never lived in Egypt. فآخري in Egypt was a 2-week holiday عند جدتي. To me it was طبعا very exotic and very exciting and very vibrant and everything that was so opposite to what I had grown up with. Final year, they selected a number of us to go and study at the University of Austin and do our final thesis out there. I would write these emails to all my friends list and my family list, and I'd figured out how to make friends by then. I would tell all of these stories, and then the strangest thing happened is I would get replies from people أنا مش بعتلهم الemails أصلاً. So I find that people were starting to forward these emails on, and it became like a thing, like kind of my adventures in Texas and my observations of what was happening there, and people were really responding to what I was writing. And my mom at that point, she was like, you have to be a writer. I'm like, so طبعا I ignored her. Our university and our business school, because it was one of the best business schools, كانوا دايما يشفطوا the graduates for places like Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, Arthur Anderson. They would place us in these interviews and everyone would be getting these amazing jobs with these beautiful packages. So everyone is getting a job, but I'm not getting a job. Finally, I get an interview at British Airways. I went to the interview, I finished the interview, and the feedback is, we can't hire her because she's gonna ruffle too many feathers. Again, my dad was like, على فكرة, this is the best thing that ever happened to you because it proves to me that you are going to be a leader. So my mom then started pushing من ناحية the writing. I had remembered when I had come to Egypt the year before, I had seen Enigma magazine. To me, this magazine in Egypt was just mind-blowing. This sexy, beautiful lifestyle, glossy magazine, and this beautiful editor. And I'm like, what is this world? This is not the Egypt that I've ever been introduced to. And so I was like, هجرب حظي. So I called them up and they said, send me your CV and a fax. I don't send my CV. I send my CVs and I print out كل الemails and أنا بعتها وبعتها. And I sent all of the samples of the university magazine I had written for. I inundated them with information. I get a call asking me to go for an interview with Yasmin Shahata in London. So I go. And I'm like, I'll do anything. Just really, really hire me. So they gave me the job. So she discussed salary. I'm like, whatever. 2,000 pounds. I'm like, done. Do I do flus to write? I'm in. I've just graduated. I get on a plane. I start working at Enigma. I also enroll for my master's, the AUC, their mass comm journalism class. So I'm doing my master's full time, and I'm doing Enigma full time, and I'm doing it with absolute unwavering passion. I was excited by the stories, excited by this world that I had been introduced to. Yasmin was amazing. Once she had trusted me, she literally gave me carte blanche to write what I want, how I want. It was just the most amazing experience for me. It was just trying to kind of navigate that typical East-West divide. At the time, these stories weren't being told, and they certainly weren't being told in English. I think anyone who was our age back then would read that book now would think it very, very tame. But at the time, just the fact that I would write that I went on a date was explosive. I didn't mean to be controversial. I didn't mean to be a feminist. I wasn't trying to deliver any message. I was just genuinely telling my story, and I think maybe that's what hit home with more girls than I ever expected it would hit home. And then I started to get a lot of feedback and emails from people saying this should be a book. Then Enigma, again, which played such a defining role in my life. Enigma agreed to publish the book. The reaction was insane to me, and it sold out, and it got so much regional media coverage. It got a lot of global coverage, which was insane to me, like in the States, in the UK. LA Times wrote this thing about it being a very empowering book, and then the Washington Post called me a self-hating Arab. So this was like, I'm like, what's going on? But it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, and I'm so thankful for it. I never sat there in a room and said, I shall start a business. I loved that magazine like it was my baby. I just loved it, and I could never imagine doing anything else. I had kind of reached the ceiling. خلاص ما فيش بعدية غير ياسمين and it's her magazine. And I knew that I'd kind of plateaued, that I didn't have the guts to jump. Ayamiha Digital طبعا wasn't even a thing in my mind, and I would never have gone and started another print magazine. So Adam's my younger brother, the oldest of my younger brothers. Adam had started before the Saura, Taskarti, which was an e-ticketing site, and he was doing really well. And he then had started Cairo Zoom, and once he started Cairo Zoom, he started to really pressure me to work with him. It's like, I don't know, whatever, Cairo Zoom is just my ONAs in the magazine. He's like, you published them a month later. Khalas, that era is over. I'm like, no way, Adam. And then the revolution happened. Everything felt different. Even as a magazine, we could no longer write about this beautiful, sexy, fluffy world anymore because it didn't exist. I felt very lost as to what stories I was supposed to be telling. I had gotten pregnant and had a miscarriage. So my first pregnancy, I miscarried, but very early on. And I was like, khalas, I think I'm ready. I'm ready now for a new stage. It had been a decade. I'd done Enigma for 10 years of my life. And I felt it was a shift. It took a while to make the shift. At that point, I was pregnant again with Maya. Me and Yusuf, the first few years of our marriage was long distance. And I was sat in this flat for Corniche Giza alone. And my parents were next door, and we needed an office. I basically moved into my parents' house because I was alone anyway, and I turned my apartment into an office, and I told Yusuf afterwards. By that point, Adam had convinced my two younger brothers as well. And I remember we sat there, the four of us. What are we doing? What is this? What's our job? And so it wasn't Mo4 at the time. At the time, it was Taskarti, and it was Cairo Zoom, and we had two web developers who, looking back, didn't have a clue what they were doing either. We were hustling. We had a lot of time on our hands, so we started to tell these stories on social media. So we started this Twitter account called The Office Egypt, and it took off in a weird, crazy way. Adam said, we have to sell banner ads on Taskarti and Cairo Zoom. I'm like, okay, let's do it. We never had an investor. Till this day, we've never gotten an investor because they're really scared of us. Completely self-funded from the start. The only way we could market the websites was through social media. I started to call up my contacts, obviously, that I had from the media industry by then, and I would go and I would meet them. And so, again, not knowing that that's what we were doing, we started to tell cool stories on social. Not knowing that that's what it was called or that's what we were doing, just having fun and seeing the reaction. So when I tried to sell banner ads on the website, this interesting thing started to happen. Repeatedly, the potential clients would say, could you do it for us? And for the first time, they started to have something called a social media budget. They suddenly felt the need to do social media, and we were kind of the right place and right time, creating really cool content without knowing that's what we were doing. We said yes to anything. Like, you're gonna pay me to do this? And they were like, yes, a retainer. What's a retainer? What are they talking about? And that's how it started. Once we started to diversify, we kind of gave it a name. Let's call it Mo4. I wanted to call it Mofo. I was vetoed. We compromised on Mo4 for the four of us. Mo4 is me and my three younger brothers, Adam and Walid and Timmy. Everyone's like, oh, how was it growing up with three brothers? There's a 6-year gap between me and Adam. And then 2 years to Walid and then a year to Timmy. So it was a little separated. It wasn't that kind of siblings growing up together in the same way. أنا كنت لوحدي شوية. And so actually العلاقة got cemented much more طبعا now in this phase of our lives. Adam is, I hate myself for actually saying this, but Adam's a genius. Adam, you can open up a topic on anything. Tech, on engineering, on space travel, on politics, on economics, anything, and he is like a book. Adam has this weird thing where he's very insightful and he has tremendous foresight. And so Adam has really been pivotal in kind of always making sure we're on to the next thing before it's even the next thing. Waleed is, let me tell you, this is Waleed, this defines Waleed. Waleed didn't speak until he was 3 years old. Mom, for a long time, was freaking out. She thought he was deaf because she would stand next to his ears and do this, and he would not يلف راسه. With time, we learned he just didn't give a couldn't be bothered to react. Tremendously creative, but also doesn't have that kind of sense of urgency that drives me. But he was also one of these kids who would jump out of windows and film themselves doing it. Adam has always been an entrepreneur, and they have Warhammer workshops. So Waleed is very, very artistic. So he's always been artistic and creative, and Waleed would paint them. And Adam realized that you could sell, if they're well painted and they're well done, you can sell them to the Warhammer workshop. Adam created a little conveyor belt in the bedroom, in Waleed's bedroom, where can be شغل Waleed to paint the Warhammers, and this is when he was like 11 or 12, and then sell on the Warhammers. حرام وليد قاعد بيبينت طول اليوم. But he would not give anyone a cut. And Timmy is like actually Timmy is a mix of all of us. So Timmy's creative, but he's also very detail-oriented and he's very analytical. Timmy's also very open to life, and Timmy's very open to learning and to new experiences. And so again, that was a benefit, unintentional benefit. A lot of times now that we're in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, you always hear about how important it is to select the right mix of partners. We didn't choose each other, but it ended up, the mix was a very powerful mix. And also the generation difference ended up being very powerful. I can see it now. The industry I left behind, I can see how much it's struggling, and I don't blame it for struggling, because who at the top of those institutions or companies is there to push them forward? Had I not been put out of that and put essentially with a bunch of kids who are born of a certain age and can't understand anything other than that, they dragged me into the future with them. They really, really did. Kicking and screaming at first. The mix became a real secret ingredient to what we were able to build. Working together was a disaster. It was a show at the beginning. We have sibling fights, very childish sibling fights. It took us maybe 3-4 years before we figured out دي حتتي, دي حتتك, دي حتتك, and when we need to align, we will align. But let's kind of understand where the boundaries are. And if we're going to argue, let's argue like we're in a professional environment, which we're not always so good at, but we're certainly better at, and not like we're in a home environment. So that was a big challenge for us at the beginning. My role is very much overseeing. It's one of those things where I think necessity really is the mother of invention. It was interesting because I kind of led a team at Enigma. I thought I could lead something, and then you realize when it's your own, it's a whole different ball game. I used to stay up at night at Enigma worrying about an article that I had to write. You didn't have this thing here, and I'm sure you understand it, this thing here where you feel physically sick because you're so freaking out about how do I get through the next day. All of these responsibilities and all of these things that you're accountable for, and all of these people who are depending on you, external and internal. There was a period where I got very, very ill. Like not ill, like not go to work ill, but very ill, like very in my headspace, like just really not functioning well. I wasn't looking after myself. Sounds cliche, but I've had to learn to breathe, to understand where my priorities are. Like bad shar, if all else up, those are not the real ups in life. If I was to wake up in the morning and the whole business was to collapse, there's much worse things bad shar that can happen to you. And so I've really had to make myself kind of center and focus on the fact, like, alhamdulillah, I have my health, I have my family. That's really all that matters. Just even little things which I've had to get myself out of the habit. Like I've had to force myself at a certain point in the night, I have to take the phone, put it in a drawer and close the drawer. And I've had to force myself to wake up and wash my face and have a shower and brush my teeth and get dressed and then open that phone, because there was a point where I was literally 24/7. I'm going to switch off the phone on a Friday, the world will not end. So about a year and a half ago, things were really, really bad for us. It was a really tough time for us, and we were a very fast growing company, and we're always pressuring ourselves, like I said, to move on to the next thing. I'm not one of these big traditional agencies that has millions in the bank to draw from. It seems big on the outside, but I'm always in startup mode, because I'm always creating something new and launching something new and developing something new, which puts a huge financial huge financial strain on us. I have no one to go to at the end of the month to pay my bills but me. I hadn't been on holiday since the day we had started that company. I had not taken a Friday or a Saturday off. I had not gone anywhere. I had not gone outside of Egypt. I didn't feel that I was entitled to do that. If I'm struggling to pay salaries, who am I to take a trip to go to Guna Hanta? You know what I mean? Or if I'm asking all of these people to stay working till 4 o'clock in the morning, I don't get to take a holiday. I did realize I have a responsibility towards these people and towards this company. If I can't function, then I've screwed them over even more. And so that was the learning for me, is that I need to make it a point, بالعافية, to take the time for myself and for my kids. I've learned to make the team understand I don't have the answers, but I'm going to trust you, and you're going to trust me, and we're going to figure this out together. I think you need to lead by example. I'm sure there is a benefit to being the kind of leader who is able to delegate and to kind of step away. To me, my leadership style is I'm going to roll up my sleeves, and I'm going to get dirtier than everyone else. So when I ask you to come up here, you don't have an excuse to say no. Or down here, actually, because I'm right down there in the muck with you. And so I think the importance of leading by example is very, very important. I think listening is a core to leadership. And I am awful at it, but I can see the benefits in it. Resilience and grit. There's 1 million people who are very, very talented, and certainly far more talented than me. But this is it for me. And it's just that kind of resilience and grit of understanding that no matter what gets thrown at us, we keep on going. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we face. You know, it's something that often gets said about us as owners and as Mo4, sometimes jokingly and sometimes with viciousness, especially again in this public fear of social media, is this idea that we're slave drivers. You know, there's been memes about this. And I'm always intrigued by that, because I think it's just very reflective of a culture that encourages mediocrity. You can't generalize ever, but I think people don't always realize how hard you have to work to take any sort of step forward, the sacrifices that have to be made. Anyone I interview, the first thing I say in my interviews now, and I've learned to say this in the last couple of years, is you're going to come in here, and it's going to be the hardest job you will ever do in your life. But you need to come in here and do this for yourself, and not for me, and not for the paycheck. Because if you're doing it for the paycheck, or if you're doing it for me, or if you're doing it for Mo4, you're going to fail. And everyone says, yeah! And then they come in and they realize that I wasn't joking. You get thrown into the deep end first day because no one has time to hold anyone's hand, and you have to work. And I've seen so many incredible talents. They just don't have that grit, and they don't have that resilience, and they're not prepared to make the sacrifices that anyone needs to make to get somewhere, whatever that somewhere is. And that's up to you and what your passions are. And I think in Egypt, we don't lack talent. We don't lack smarts. What we lack is work ethic and resilience. And it is what keeps us, I think, struggling as a nation, despite having so many incredible qualities as people and as a country. At the beginning, I tried to play it cool with my Taylor Swift obsession and make it seem like it's ironic, but it's not ironic. I think she's awesome. I think she's really screwed up in her head. And you know what it is? It's that last song that means everything to me. And I'll tell you why. Mo4 is not one of these companies where everyone is like, I love Mo4 and I love the Mowafis, and they're so all khalis, quite the opposite. Either it's like that Amy's or kullus. I've heard it all. It took me a while to train my brothers to do this, but I'm a big believer in karma. I have never once responded, even when the closest people to me have me over. I have gone, my response is I'm going to wake up in the morning even earlier, and I'm going to work even harder, and I'm going to try even more, because my success is my own reward. And it's such a cliche, but success is the biggest revenge. So this Taylor Swift song was her revenge song. She goes, honey, I rose up from the dead, I do it all the time. I'm like, yes! As soon as that song came out, I'm like, oh, she wrote this for me. I'm going to tell you something funny about me with reading, and my husband always makes fun of me about this, is that I quite literally have suitcases and suitcases and suitcases and suitcases full of books. Such a voracious reader. So 2 or 3 days, next book, 2 or 3 days, next book. But I can never remember what I've read. I'm very aware about how they affect my imagination or affect how I feel about things or affect sometimes the ideas I have about things. And I don't know where it's coming from, but I know it's because of what I've read. However, certainly some books that for me always stick to me as having been very impactful for whatever reason. Certainly all of the fiction by Ahdaf Suwaif, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, and The Fountainhead. I just remember the visceral reaction to them. I don't remember the thing or the story, but I remember the feeling that I had reading it. Potential. Confusing. Guilty. Livelihood. Confusing. Essential. Not so essential. Everything is life. For me, like one of the biggest journeys and lessons that I'm on right now is just understanding the importance of kind of bringing it back here and trusting my intuition, just creating my own headspace and understanding the importance of that and understanding that in order to make all of these crazy moving pieces around me stay up in the air, it'll fall apart if I'm going to fall apart. This idea of kind of just like centering yourself. I think that's the thing that I'm really all about. I'm just being in the moment. And I'm just going to appreciate this moment. This is awesome. Hey, this is awesome. This is awesome. Thank you.
I check it once, then I check it twice. Oh, look what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me do.